everybody. It's Christine Garvin, and I am back here with you and for another one of my new series, Time to Learn About Your Hormones, ladies. So I developed this interview series with women that are experts in the field in a bunch of different arenas, because I think it's so important for women to really start to understand how to work with their hormones, whether that's for issues with fertility or that's for issues of trying to regulate your cycle after you get off birth control, or if you're dealing with perimenopause and things like fibroids or cysts like I've had to do. And so I'm so excited today to talk with an old friend and an amazing leader, I feel like, in the Ayurvedic field, and her name is Amy Branum, and she's actually based in California now, in Grass Valley. Is that right? Yes. Yeah, but she used to live here in Asheville with me, and that's when I first met her. And it's been awesome to be able to see her just grow in her business and help a lot of women out. So I'm really excited to talk to her today about Ayurveda and basically what Ayurveda is all about, and then how it can help our hormones. So welcome, Amy.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much for being with me here today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
For sure. So why don't we just get started with, you telling us a bit about what Ayurveda is, because so many people have heard of it but don't really understand it.
Mm-hmm. So Ayurveda is a school of medicine that came from India, and it's actually one of the major schools of natural medicine, traditional medicines. So there's Chinese medicine, and then Ayurveda, and then usually the Greek is the other school of medicine that's used more commonly. But so Ayurveda is about 5,000 years old, but you'd be surprised at how often science is catching up to what they have been telling us for years. Mm-hmm. So Ayurveda is, is based on kind of on the elements, on the 5 elements. And you may have heard of doshas, like what's your dosha, being vata, pitta, or kapha. And so it's based on our body being made up of, our constitution being made up of the different elements and how we bring those back into balance. So what I love about Ayurveda is that the main focus is not necessarily on herbs, but more on lifestyle, what we eat, how we eat it, how it comes out. It's very much on digestion. They are masters at digestion, in my opinion. So that's like, if you don't have your whole lifestyle worked out, it's hard to stay in balance, so they focus back on that. You always go back to, well, what are you doing in your life? How are you living your life? So that's what I can appreciate the most about it. Does that answer your question, or should I explain more about Ayurveda?
No, I think that's great. And I just have to note, I think it's pretty funny that both of us have our cats walking through the screen right now.
Yeah.
People, what are you going to do, right?
My cat joins in on every video that I do.
That's what I was going to say. He's like the star of all of the,
yeah.
the interviews that I do. So he made his appearance and he's sitting behind me. So so that's great. Like I learned a bit about Ayurveda. I had to take, I think, 1 or 2 classes in my master's program and my holistic health program. And that's what drew me, was the focus really on digestion and, really kind of like getting that into gear, and that it depends on the constitution you're born with, but also the constitution of where you are now. And then, I mean, I know it gets deep, right? Like it's like times of the day and like all of this stuff.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my God, I can't even. But I'm curious because the focus really, when I learned about it, was pretty much vegetarian approach. Is all Ayurveda like that, or is it kind of like dependent on the body?
No, I would say in general, there is more of a vegetarian approach, but even, you know, the masters would say, you know, if someone needs meat and they're vegetarian, just sneak it in, just get it in there to them, you know. So there is an acknowledgement of when people really need to be nourished in that way, like with meat, that it's okay.
Mhm.
Um, so there are definitely people that follow Ayurveda uh, that are meat eaters,
Mhm.
plenty, but probably more of like the yogic diet is, you know, or the Vedic diet is more vegetarian. Um, but yeah, you can definitely incorporate meat, and a lot of people um, for sure incorporate bone broth and things like that for people, especially with very depleted systems and digestive systems.
Gotcha. I didn't realize bone broth was a big part of Ayurveda too. I know
It's
that.
well, it's not. I don't know that it is necessarily, but people do bring it in to heal. You know, when it depends on how depleted you are and how strong your digestive fire is, and if you can break down your nutrients or not. You know,
Gotcha.
so and there may be a lot of Ayurvedic doctors that would recommend only being vegetarian, but um, you know, there's plenty of people that eat meat. In India, in India, it's on the menu. You know, there's meat on the menu, even though there are full vegetarian towns, but there are, you know, there's meat in the cities and stuff.
So the three doshas, correct? Is that, am I saying that
Hmm.
correct? Are vata, pitta, and kapha,
Yes.
right? And so what I remember, my little memory about
Hmm.
this is vata is air, right? And I can think of it. I love it. Your cat, so perfect. He does that too. Um, I know I have some vata in me, and that's when I can feel flighty when
Uh-huh.
that vata kicks in. And then pitta is fire, right? And so that can kind of be like the angry side sometimes. And then kapha is earth, right?
Yeah.
Yes. And so that can
Open
be,
water.
for some people, it can be like a struggle to get up and off the couch and doing things, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I know that's a very
Well,
simplistic way of putting it, but.
yeah, well, there's a balanced side to Vata and a out of balance side to Vata. So
Mm,
balance, the out of balance is, I can't remember what you said, but um, getting
right.
maybe spacey and overwhelmed, anxiety, that's all out of balance Vata. But the balanced Vata is very creative and very energetic and lively, you know. So there's a good side to it, and then there's the more destructive side to it, and so we try to keep it in balance. And like the pittas, they can get angry, they can get judgmental for sure. They usually do, but um, but they're also great at getting things done and getting things accomplished,
Mhm.
being on point with things, and we need that in our world just as much as we need the creative vatas, you know.
Yeah.
And then the kaphas, they do have the bad habit of being lazy or lethargic, things like that, or they can get to that way. But they just need more stimulation.
Mm,
And the good side of being a kapha is that they are more grounded, they're more compassionate,
right.
and I have plenty of vata patients who fantasize about kapha. Like
I know.
they
I
want a
was just
kapha
thinking that's
partner.
exactly right, actually.
They want someone to just pull them back down to the earth. So
Okay. Well, thank you for explaining that, because I feel like a lot of times you just hear about sort of the negative things.
yeah, yeah.
So since we're here to, chat hormones, I'd love to know a little bit about maybe based on those doshas, if you see different hormonal things that come up for each dosha.
Oh yeah, well sure. Where do I start with that? Um, I guess I could say, well, it just depends. The symptoms, the things that happen, I can put those more into according to the doshas.
Okay.
So, let's see. Well, an easy one is PMS, you know, and so the Pitta PMS person is angry, irritable, and impatient. They might get headaches, you know, that sort of thing. Um, the Vata, the Vata, I've never like quite put this all in separate, like organized it like this, but the Vata PMSE person would be more um, overwhelmed, maybe just shut down, um, definitely they get the anxiety driven irritability. The cramping, that would be more Vata. The pain is Vata. And then Kapha people will eat lots of ice cream, lots of chocolate, just stay at home, snuggle up in a, in a blanket, watch some movies, cry, whatever they need to do. Yeah. So that would be PMS. Things like fibroids, that's more of a Kaphic imbalance.
Oh, okay.
Because it's accumulation of the tissues. But also it's probably pitta driven a little bit. And then what are other things? Menopause, when we're going into menopause, we're changing into the Vata time of life. So that is more that's what women stop sleeping, they get more anxious. So actually a good thing to do for menopause, with all the drying out, the vaginal secretions dry out, you kind of become drier all in general, is to do more demulcent herbs so that they can balance that dryness. Demulcent herbs like marshmallow, flaxseed, shatavari, things like that. So things to help you to hold the waters in your body again. So yeah, menopause is a great example of what happens with Vata taking back over our body. But that's the trick to balancing a lot of menopausal symptoms, is to do the herbs and the foods that help, that are more like mucilaginous, that will hold the waters.
That makes sense. So what about, in say perimenopause, like what are some of the things that women can do to help themselves through this big transitional phase of their life?
Yeah. With perimenopause, it seems like you, I do go more on the individual symptoms, but in general, what perimenopause is, a lot of women feel like they're going crazy. They're that there's anxiety there that happens. There's just general irritation in life, like they don't relax very well. So I generally tend to go towards the calming herbs and the uplifting herbs. So motherwort is one of my favorite ones, even though it's a more cooling herb. But motherwort is a little bit antidepressant. It's very calming for anxiety. It's great for heart palpitations, with the anxiety with heart palpitations. But it's also a uterine decongestant. It helps to relieve uterine stagnation. It can help to bring on your period. It's an emmenagogue. So motherwort's one of my favorite ones. Another one of my favorite ones is Damiana. And Damiana is, I call it the happy herb, the happy medicine. And it's just very uplifting. It does also bring on your period, I feel like, even a little more stronger than motherwort. But it just relaxes you so that you can be happy, and I feel like there's, for whatever reason, the perimenopause is just a lot of tension on our nervous system. So that is basically, if you want to, if you feel like your hormones do need to be more balanced, you can do things like Dong Quai, or which is Angelica sinensis, or you can do Shatavari again, but and Vitex. But I don't know. I think I tend, unless it's a definite part of the cycle, then I tend to just kind of nourish the nervous system at that point.
Okay, that makes sense. And I'm glad that you brought up Vitex, because that's kind of a more well-known herb, I'd say, in terms of dealing with perimenopause, because it acts on the pituitary and can help with progesterone leveling out essentially
Yeah.
hormones in general, but with progesterone. So, but I also know it doesn't work for everyone.
No.
So, yeah, I don't know if you want to add anything to that. Just
Yeah.
issues to look for with Vitex.
I haven't found the um if there is a specific person that Vitex works for, and a specific character that, or idea of a person that it works for. I haven't found that personally. Sometimes you can do that with herbs, but it is worth trying out, in my opinion, because for some people it completely relieves all of their symptoms. Other people get nauseous, and you can even get more depressed on Vitex.
I've read that. Yeah, there's a lot of issues with that.
So, it's with every single herb, we just have to pay attention to what it's doing to us, because they are very powerful. People don't think they are just because they're natural, and sometimes they can completely throw you off. But, I say I give it a month. You should always take a break. With Vitex, you take a break when you're on your period.
Right. Mm-hmm.
But I give it a month and then just see how I feel. And if you don't feel better after a month or two, but if you start to feel worse, then just take it out and find something else. There's so many more herbs that help to balance their hormones, that Vitex isn't the only one.
That's really good information, because I think, things come out and people like glob on to that one thing.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And there's so many others, especially, in Ayurveda and Chinese medicine. It's, like you said, thousands and thousands of years that have gone into figuring this stuff out,
Yeah.
and we're just like, oh, it's all new. And it's like, it's not that simple. There's a lot of guidance to look back at, and not just one thing. So
Right. And it's not whatever the popular, there's these trending herbs
exactly.
at all times. And I'm like, no, it's not CBD. There's other things, or whatever.
You're getting started on the CBD. I mean, I know it can be great, but just we're full.
Yeah.
Being created, So specifically for fibroids. So fibroids and cysts are very different things. But, a lot of times they're looked at in Western medicine or alternative medicine as coming from estrogen dominance.
Yeah.
So would you, recommend particular herbs for both of those, or do they kind of each have their own that would work better for dealing with them?
You're asking if different herbs between cysts and fibroids?
Yeah, ovarian cysts.
It seems like the herbs still overlap, because for the most part, because you focus on things that are astringent, herbs that are astringent, and reduce those excess tissues. And then you also bring in herbs that are what are referred to as uterine decongestants. So even though I know cyst isn't the uterus, but still, or this is on the ovary, but it still acts on the reproductive organs. So in that way, they kind of the herbs themselves usually still do overlap. And it has a lot to do with diet,
And I was
between
going to ask you about that. Like, what are diet and lifestyle recommendations that like you said in the beginning, it's not just about the herbs, really.
Yeah. So diet and lifestyle for cysts and fibroids is generally the high protein, high fat diet, no sugars. And I will say that it's honestly kind of hard to work with people that have fibroids. They have a hard time bringing in the balance of balancing all that other stuff. Fibroids seem to have a lot of emotional component to it, whether it's past traumas or femininity, like traumas with femininity in general. Whether that's just an idea that was put in your head, like your idea of your femininity, or actual traumas. They're all traumas. But So anyway, there's this emotional component. And so a lot of times I find that it's hard for people with fibroids, especially to make all those changes.
Yeah.
So they can take all the herbs, but you really need to like go full force if you want to try to fight fibroids.
Yeah.
But diet and lifestyle. So the other thing with lifestyle is very important, and that's where in Ayurveda it depends on your dosha. And so where you are out of balance, you want to pull things back into balance. So the Vata person who has a lot of anxiety and who has a lot, even though the, I want to point out that the fibroids and the cysts are more kapha coming in. It depends on where you're at, that you're throwing it off, that where you're throwing it out of balance. So the Vata person who has too much anxiety, and they're probably not eating their 3 meals a day. They're skipping it. No, I'm too busy to eat, whatever. So those sorts of people, they're probably skinnier. They need to get back on a routine with their life. And Vatas hate to hear that, but they need like a routine life. They need to eat in a routine manner. They need to eat the right foods, not just snack on everything. They need to slow down. So doing yoga or stretching or whatever, that's more slow, more like yin yoga or hatha yoga, and then the pitta person who is trying to bring balance back, they need to slow down. Certainly they need to cool themselves off, stay cool, stay near the water, not eat so many spicy foods, not try to like reduce their judgment and being critical. But they definitely need the more hatha yoga. They don't need to go to Bikram. They need to stay away from the Bikram yoga. So so that's how it works with Ayurveda, is like you look at where you're out of balance and bring that back into balance. And that does make a difference with reducing the imbalances with fibroids and cysts. Yeah. And I didn't say kapha, but kapha people, they need more stimulation, more exercise, to go jog around the block every day. The pittas and the vatas, they should walk.
Walk, don't run.
In the woods or something. They need to they need to just calm down.
I mean, the woods for me is such a big one for sure. It changes the way I feel. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. 100%. And so, so you have to just find that way to bring balance back to yourself, and not, some people think that balance is what makes them feel good. And that's not necessarily always the truth, because sometimes that's your out of balance dosha pulling you. But they're like, no, but I love to skip my meals and just get a million things done and not really finish any of the projects that I start, No, I know that feels good, kind of, but I promise it'll feel good if you slow down, do a little meditation, whatever you need to like calm your mind,
Yeah,
So,
it is funny that I feel like so much of life is going against what we feel is natural in some ways, because it's like really those are old patterns.
yeah.
A personality, or things that you went through trauma, and so that's the way that you learned.
It's our coping skills. Yeah.
And so it's so hard because you're like, oh, I have to do the exact opposite of what I want to do, but that's actually what's going to be most healing for me.
Yeah. And when you start doing those things and really incorporating them into your life, then you realize how nourishing they are. Mm-hmm. And that's when you say, oh, okay, now this is balance. This is actually balance, not all that other crazy moment. This is balance. And even when you get off track, it's easier to come back to that, because you remember, oh, that's what I should feel like, and that's what I really do want to feel like.
Right. And I'm glad you brought that up, because I also think nourishment is such an important word. And I can think of my own experience of going on this healing path in my 20s and how different that looks and feels to being on it in my 40s, because in my 20s, I don't know if I wanted to be nourished. I did on a certain level, but I also was like, but I still want to do all these things,
Yeah.
And now that feeling of feeling nourished is like, oh my God, I want that like 98% of the time, So
Yeah.
sort of much more willing to do what it takes to get there. And so I feel like that can shift and change,
Oh yeah. Yeah.
over the lifetime. Yeah. And just one other thing, because I'm like, you said all these things that I was like, oh my God, yes. But I'm really glad that you brought up about kind of the, if you want to call it the spiritual side of fibroids, or, sort of the chakras or whatever you want to say. But just, I think it's so important to look at that side of things too when dealing with fibroids, right? Like that you really have to see what kind of trauma, whether this life or past lives or ancestral or whatever, is kind of focused around that reproductive area. And
Yeah.
also the parts in your life where you're like, my creativity is stunted or whatever, because I thought a lot about this personally with dealing with a large fibroid growing, and really like I was doing my creative work and all of this stuff, but really I was like hustle, push, go, constant, I'm Pitta Vata. So it's like that combination of like, got to do it all, and although, I've always been pretty good with eating, still just like doing much more of that. I didn't have consistency in my life, because it's like, oh, I'm teaching these dance classes at night, which really wasn't good for my system, and on and on and on, And so to me, looking back, it's very obvious sort of where I kind of got off course. And I think it's really hard to admit that to ourselves when we're in it a lot of times, right? It's something big has to happen. And I kind of see that's what fibroids and cysts often are, right? They're like, hi, you haven't been listening.
Right.
And now you have to. And so, here we are. So, I mean, I love everything that you say about the Ayurvedic approach to dealing with these things is really how we should be living life in a lot of ways.
Yeah. It is the way we should be living life, but especially I feel like our society has taught us to kind of ignore our cycles and, just, okay, you got to just deal with that and keep going instead of paying attention to not only our cycles, our moon cycles, but our life cycles. And are we honoring that, or our femininity, or are we going to end up carrying this baggage of a fibroid by the time we're 30, this emotional baggage of what we may have been taught, or what happened to us, or what we saw when we were a kid or a teenager or whatever.
Yes, so true. And just like the really sort of patriarchal paradigm around how we need to be living our lives in so many ways, right? This constant push and hustle and do, like, even if we're doing kind of work we want to be doing, but we're still not working with our femininity around it. We're not working with those cycles. Yeah. Woo, it's intense. So what about some other phases of life, like in terms of like, I think one of the things that's coming up for people that I see these days that are younger is fertility issues, particularly like if they've been on birth control and then they get off and then they kind of struggle with getting pregnant, or at least even getting their period back. Like how do you work with that?
Well, honestly, it's hard depending on how long people have been on birth control, because that does mess up your whole endocrine system, so you have to kind of detox from it. And I, number one, I do look at their diet and make sure, well, how much sugar are you eating, working with liver herbs to just help to clear out excess hormones, because they do get stored there. But then, with for that, then we bring in things like Vitex or Dong Quai, depending on the type of person they are for Shatavari, depending on, it just depends on what their symptoms are, on what I give them. But, and then we just have to nourish back that natural hormonal cycle with the herbs. And it can take months, at least 1 month, if not 2 or 3 or 6 months, but the herbs will help to increase your fertility much faster than if you're not taking herbs. It helps in a tremendous way compared to non-herbal supplementation.
Right. I mean, and I think that's really important for people to understand too, because, I think first of all this stuff is coming out on how birth control impacts people for a long time, right?
Oh,
It
yeah.
really does change our endocrine system, as you said. And, I feel like it's just really kind of coming out in a big way now.
Mm-hmm.
And also people have kind of known like, oh, it may take like a month or so for me to, be able to get pregnant after I got off, but like that it can really be this process, and so that's where I love the power of herbs too, is that they can come in and do some stuff that like nothing else can,
Yeah.
So
Help
that's
us out.
really cool. Yeah. So I'm curious, because I wanted to go into this earlier, but we're talking about all this good stuff. How did you get into Ayurveda to begin with?
So, first I studied Western herbalism,
Okay.
and I actually studied it there in Asheville with Peggy Ellis many years ago, about 18 years ago. That was what is now the Appalachia School of Holistic Herbalism.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
But so yeah, I studied there and got an intro to Ayurveda class at the time, and I loved it. It just feels right. Every explanation I hear from Ayurveda feels right to me. Chinese medicine is just a little bit too distant. It doesn't really work in my brain or with my soul, maybe. I'm not sure. That doesn't discredit it on any level. It's just what works for me. So there I got an intro to it, and I had always been interested, but there's no Ayurveda schools around, or there wasn't at the time that I was there. So then when I moved out here, though, but I have always been completely obsessed with, since I started learning about herbs, that's been my life. And I was also in college at the time, and I was studying, taking all the botany classes. It was just like, plants are my life. That's my obsession. But I have always also been the sick one. I've always had health issues, so I've basically been my own guinea pig all of these years, along with my child and my anyone else living in my house. But and so then when I moved out to California, we just happened to move to the town where there's an Ayurveda college.
Nice.
So the California College of Ayurveda, and so I got to go really in depth there and study, and that did that program for 2.5 years. So that's
So were you already doing work kind of with herbs and stuff like in your job or in your career before you went to the Ayurveda school? Or
yeah. Yeah, I worked at the herb school in Asheville, and taught some classes there, and I've been teaching and practicing clinically for many years. I also had a body care company, herbal body care company, long time ago. After I had my daughter, I had it for about 7 years.
Nice. So you've done all the different elements. So
Yeah.
what is your practice like now? What kinds of things do you offer to women and men out in the world?
Oh, so I'm a clinical practitioner. So I do generally I work with almost anything that comes my way, which is a broad range of things. But I do focus on, I go very much in depth with what's happening with them. And I do focus on changing their, like, it almost becomes a coaching thing, life coaching process and
Mhm.
counseling. And I help people to get back on track, whether it's changing their lifestyle practices.
Mhm.
So we look at where things are out of balance and whether we need to bring in even meditation and getting into our body or going for walks or whatever. But strongly working on digestion, strengthening digestion or getting it back in balance. Um, I'll do a lot with the mind issues, if I can generalize it. Things like anxiety, that all of that is always intertwined with what's going on with their other physical ailments. And they usually their main concern is, like A, B, or C. They'll list all of those, but then we always look at, okay, well, what's your digestion doing? Oh, well, that's way messed up. People don't really focus on that. They just live with those things.
Right. They're like, it's just normal because it's been like
Yeah.
this for so long. Yeah.
Yeah. They're like, oh, I just have a bowel movement every 4 days, and that's
Woo!
the way it's always been, or whatever.
Yeah.
Or I have it, um, or they're never salad or whatever, and so and that's where I say, well, okay, these are probably all related, so I just go and find the things that a lot of people have just accepted about their life, that this is part of who I am. And a lot of times I can say, but actually we can change that, you can change that, we can work on it. So that's what I do a lot. I definitely work with a lot of herbs. I work with flower essences a lot,
Mm.
which help to shift things dramatically very often. And so I do that. I also offer Ayurvedic body therapies, which are
Oh, nice.
um, abhyangas, which is kind of an oil massage, medicated oil massage, and Sharadaras, where you pour the oil over
I
their
have
head.
not done. I'm like, I
Yeah.
had it done one time here in Asheville years ago, and I like dream about it.
Yeah, it's an
I don't think that place
amazing.
is open anymore, but yeah.
Yeah, it's so simple. It seems so simple, but it's so powerful. And then I also teach classes. I teach
Okay.
herbal classes and Ayurveda classes.
So do you mostly do one-on-ones with people there in Grass Valley, or do you see people, all over all
Oh
over
yeah,
the US and world?
yeah. I do. I do online consultations too.
Oh, great. So what's your website so people can check it out?
My website is lasyawellness.com. It's LASYA wellness, WELLNESS. And then my school where I teach classes is through the Wild Temple, um, which is thewildtemple.com.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah. And
Awesome.
so
So don't
I
I
teach.
will put those in the notes and everything so people can, link directly to there
Okay,
and
great. Thank you.
yeah. So I totally could ask you like a gazillion questions because I'm like,
Yeah.
what about this? But we'll close it out here. Thank you so much for being here with me today.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I mean, it's so, again, I've always loved Ayurveda sort of at a distance, but all the things that you talk about, and this is what is good about what alternative medicine, or what do you want to say, whatever you want to say, functional medicine, like is learning the things that were already known, for so
Right.
long. And so there's these bridges that are starting to happen,
Mhm.
and I think especially for women and the healing that women need to do, it's like we need those bridges,
Yes.
and to understand, understand what's going on with our bodies so that we have that power to really heal through sometimes pretty minor changes, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
they're minor, but they're really hard to actually do,
Right.
so yeah, I so appreciate you being with me here today, and definitely everybody check out Amy's website and be in contact with her, to get your health on track if you're having some issues. So thanks for being here again today, and I will see you guys soon.